For this episode of Let's Talk Jinx, which we do every Wednesday on the channel about anything to do with Jinx, every 2 weeks we do the patch video, and it's patch 12.8, in which case we talk about changes to either Jinx or other changes that might affect other AD carries because it'll affect the Jinx laning phase matchup. And it turns out we got both of those in this patch because it's MSI, it's the MSI patch, it's a pro play aimed patch, and if you've been watching pro play, despite the nerf Jinx got earlier and the nerf to Gale Force, which is part of why she was strong in pro play, they're nerfing Jinx again. Now, I will admit I am biased because they already nerfed Jinx and then they nerfed Gale Force and now they're nerfing Jinx yet again because, as they say, Jinx has reigned supreme in bot lane all season long. Instead of putting a damper on her late game havoc, we're reopening her vulnerability to get all-in early. And I'm saying my bias because some people wanted Jinx's damage to be nerfed, and you're wrong. I'm just going to say you're wrong. Like, factually, you're wrong in terms of how Riot likes to nerf champions. If Jinx is a late game champion, nerfing her late game isn't the issue. If the issue is anything, it's that she's not weak enough early on to try and put her so far behind she can never get to that late game. But if it's the late game, she's supposed to be strong, it defeats the purpose then of playing a late game champion to not be strong in the late game if you weren't put behind. However, those windows to do that in Riot's philosophy, why I'm saying people are factually wrong about this, is because Riot's philosophy when it comes to buffing and nerfing is they don't want to nerf strengths and buff weaknesses. Instead, they want to buff strengths if a champion needs it and nerf weaknesses if a champion needs it. So that's what they're actually doing here by dropping her base health from 610 to 560, meaning that her weakness is supposed to be, again, in the laning phase. Not only is she supposed to be squishy all game long, really, to be honest, but you know, once you get lifesteal on anybody nowadays, you're just going to heal, outdo grievous wounds, and just stay alive. But more importantly, it's supposed to open up the idea that, hey, if this Jinx plays poorly, if the Jinx play is too risky, if you get a good dive on the Jinx, she's going to die a little bit easier because she has 50 less health to work with. So there you go. And I don't know, my bias, I was saying, was kind of leaking out because I'd see those calls of people like, take away her crit damage and lower that and stuff like this. It's like, no, that's not how Riot does it. That's not how it's going to be done to Jinx, who wasn't even in pro play like the last 3 years anyway. So, you know, we got to enjoy this while it lasted, so to speak. But with that being said, 50 health might not be that much in terms of some of the things Jinx can still get away with Tom Kench and whatnot, and other, you know, supports that have also enabled her to be meta. What might shake things up though and make people happier in the bottom lane more than, you know, the lack of maybe heavy nerfs is that a lot of other AD carries are also being buffed. I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor on the recording, but you got like Xayah is getting a nerf. But then you got Kai'Sa being adjusted, you got Ezreal being buffed, Jhin being buffed, Tristana being buffed, and we're actually going to go over those as a matter of fact because why not? So we scroll down, as a matter of, like, right above was actually Ezreal. The R cooldown now decreases with rank. Ezreal's been on the fringe of power in both solo queue and competitive play. We're giving him more access to his ult as the game goes on for those big high moments. Be careful where you recall. That's a funny one just because, like, with Jinx too, with the global ults, people like don't pay attention that they're recalling in a place that can be seen, so they can fire that ult off and try and hit you across the map, and it's actually kind of funny. But with that being said, yeah, so that's an example, right? So the ult cooldown has always been 120 seconds at all ranks. And for those that don't play Ezreal, that's because for every Q that you land, his Mystic Shot, I believe that's what it's called, it lowers the cooldown. Whether you landed on minions, whether you landed on enemy champions, whether you landed on like a jungle camp, it decreases that. So if it's 120 seconds or a full 2 minutes, every time you're spamming that ability, that takes it down a second for every one of those that you land. So it's not really ever a full 2 minutes. However, even when you get a bunch of cooldown reduction, it can still sometimes feel like it takes a while to really get that ult going, especially when it's the late game and it's still 120 seconds. With cooldown reduction and stuff, maybe it's not a full 120 seconds, but even with having to spam Mystic Shots, like, the idea of using this ultimate sometimes feels a little bit rare. So I can understand this one, in which case it's going from 120 to 120, 105 at level 11, and then 90 seconds at level 16. This is with cooldown reduction, it'll be even lower than 90 seconds, and it might just feel a little bit better, you know what I mean? With that said, when it comes to the Jinx-Ezreal matchup, this affects nothing in terms of the ultimates, but again, Jinx will have that 50 less health. So if you're someone that actually plays into Ezreal and it feels difficult already, you're going to have even less health to deal with that. But if you don't, and you actually think it's actually really fine to deal with Ezreal, outside of maybe him trying to Mystic Shot, or like, you know, basically uses E to get away. I keep saying Mystic Shot for everything. All of Ezreal's abilities are just Mystic Shot, right? Anyways, if you feel like it's actually already been pretty good to bully him, maybe this will make it a little bit more of an even ground, but again, your rockets still outrange him, and you can use the minion wave to block most of his skill shots because most of his things are in fact skill shots. Even when he jumps forward with the E, it'll target a minion if the minion's closer than you are. So just kind of use the minion wave to juggle around Ezreal's abilities. But like at level 6, especially in the laning phase, it's the same cooldown. It's not really going to change until you get out of laning phase anyways by level 11 and such. That's when you want to worry. And even as a Jinx player, we should know this as an ultimate of our own that's cross map. Watch where you recall. Jhin. Good old Jhin, a fellow August champion. The W root durations being increased, the damage reduction against monsters removed, the E traps now recharge faster, and damage reduction against monsters removed for first trap. Their words here. For someone who loves to put on a show, Jhin hasn't been performing all that well. We're giving him more power to set the stage, especially when he catches someone stepping out of place. We're also helping him clear camps faster with his W and E so we can get Jingle to a 44.44% win rate. I know they have that crossed out and it's a joke because of the 4 and stuff, but at the same time, who knows, you know, somebody out there like a really good Jhin main, or even someone like I Keep a Taco who likes to experiment even sometimes, they might find a way to make like jungle Jhin work, and that might be interesting, like sniping people out the jungle. I don't know, anyways, so the W flourish, it's going from 1, 1.25, 1.5, 1.75 in 2 seconds, to 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, 2, and 2.5 seconds. So if you get rooted, especially late game, you're almost rooted for 2.5 seconds. You're gonna die. That's like Morgana binding on top of that. You're just kind of dead at that point. The damage against monsters is no longer reduced, and the E captive audience, the first Lotus trap, no longer is reduced by 35% against monsters and summons. It will be interesting to see, like, these are buffs that are gonna affect monster camps. So like maybe his ability to steal dragons using these instead of having to just use his ultimate. It's going to be probably pretty rare and niche still, but it'll be interesting. However, in the laning phase, unless he's maxing the W, you don't have to worry about that new max like root time of almost 2.5 seconds, because the old one right now on live, I should say, by the time you watch this, it won't be, of course, but it's 2 seconds at max ranked as it is, and most of it, he's probably going to put like only a couple points into it in the laning phase. It's probably going to really go in the Q, at least 1 point into E. Maybe no points in the E. That was the thing. Sometimes people put no points in E on Jhin, and it's all just Q and W. But I feel like putting like 1 point is probably a good idea now. So it's probably Q max, probably maybe 1 point in the E, so the rest of the points into the W, in which case if you're Jinx, the root time is still basically going to be the same as it was if you put like 1 point or maybe 3 points in. So about, you know, a second and a quarter, second and a half. Not that much changing the laning phase. Out of laning phase, if you get caught and you don't have a way to cleanse that or something, like you got to be a bit more careful than you've been being, because that could be death. I know it's like it's only a quarter second more, but like in a game where the death recap says you died and 0.06 seconds, a quarter second is a long time to worry about, you know what I mean? So just be careful about stuff like that. This one, again, I feel this is more for jungle monsters more than enemy champions, but like it is there, like the trap recharge time is going down by 2 seconds by max rank. Again, it's not going to be max first or second, so you probably don't have to worry about that early anyways, but even 4 seconds off of the early game is a bit of a thing to just, you know, catch your footing. So there you go. Kai'Sa's getting adjusted. The passive proc AP ratio is actually being increased, the W AP ratio is being decreased, and the R shield AP ratio is being increased. So just a fun fact, because a lot of people like to spam Kai'Sa's that they're building wrong in like ARAM or something when they're building full AP. Kai'Sa scales, especially her W, insanely well on AP. Her W is like old Nidalee Spear, if not worse, because it's longer range and you can spam that every time you land it. The cooldown's like 2 seconds. So if you see someone building AP Kai'Sa on ARAM, they're probably building correctly, because especially on ARAM, where it's just a narrow lane, that's just, it's really disgusting. I'm guilty of even playing it too. It's actually really good, at least on that map. But what I'm saying also is, like, for someone who maybe doesn't play Kai'Sa all that often, a lot of her abilities actually also scale off of AP as well. So whether she's building AP, AD, or a mix of both, like, her abilities just kind of scale. They do say in this post, though, AP Kai'Sa today likes to burst her enemies down by spamming W from afar. Sorry, ARAM players. Well, there we go. We're looking to move her away from that pattern, instead play more around single pops of her passive, which is still feel distinct from her AD builds that really rely on attack speed and repeated passive procs. This should help all of her stats feel rewarding, as well as better align her playstyle with her identity regardless of how she chooses to adapt. I disagree, Riot. I love the way it is now, and I'm going to continue to play that the way it is now, so sue me. But with that being said, on the Rift, when you're playing against this champion as Jinx, she's probably building a AD or a mix, so most of these changes might not actually matter for you, because she's probably not building a straight up AP. That said, the shield strength on her ultimate when she's diving in is going to be higher based on how much AP she does have. So what this might actually do, I take it back, this might make her build mixed damage more often, because then she'll get a benefit from things like the shield strength and like the magic damage while still having enough AD to DPS well. But in the laning phase, this won't really show up until at least she, for one, has her ultimate, for two, probably levels up things like the Void Seeker and the passive on the second skin. So this won't be like an out the gate levels 1 through 5 situation for now. Again, like with Jin 2, the main thing that changes in these matchups is that Jinx will have less health. So keep that in mind. You have 50 less health. Let's see, I think there was a Tristana's change, as a matter of fact. So the AD growth is being increased on Tristana. Tristana's lost her scaling identity over time, but returning some power to her late game, which would make her less reliant on blasting all in with the Hail of Blades from an early snowball start. So Tristana's like Jinx, she's supposed to scale into the late game, be really good late game, stuff like that. She hasn't been, and she's actually been better early than late game. So it's an example. So now they're trying to buff that late game to see if they can kind of shift her back to where she's supposed to be. So her AD growth is going from 3.3 to 3.7, and the AD at level 18 now, or base AD, of course, has no items, will be from 115.1 to 121.9. With crit and stuff, that's, you know, increased damage and that the DPS, that actually be a bit better late game, but that doesn't really nerf the early game that she's not supposed to have. That's really well. So we'll see how that goes. It might make her swap out with Jinx in the pro play meta even. We'll see. Again, if she's having extra AD and you're having less health, this might swing towards Tristana, at least at the beginning, until we find a way to adapt to less health. But I believe, of course, there's the Xayah change, the Q base damage decreased late, cooldown increased late. Xayah's lethality builds has risen to dominance in pro play and solo queue, and the poke patterns unfortunately don't offer much counterplay in lane. Since those builds tend to max Q first, we're hitting the rank up incentives to make lethality Xayah a little less appealing, which is ironic because if you're building lethality, you want to build that as an early game stat. But basically, even though you're going to have less health, Xayah's going to have less damage on the Q if she's going to keep maxing that anyways, as well as the cooldown is going to be going up on it, so you're going to have a little bit extra wiggle room to play around with that, hopefully. But that is all for the changes to Jinx, or things that will affect Jinx. It looks like most of these other changes are not really for the Jinx builds. None of the bug fixes are to Jinx. Now, on a side note, I'm going to look through the bug fixes on my own. I really hope they fix that thing where when you're leaving a game, it mutes all of your computer's audio. That would be kind of nice. I don't like that. Upcoming skins. So you have a Senna skin. So you might see Senna in your lanes a bit more often. She has not only just a regular skin, but a prestige skin. Let's see. Sivir's getting a skin, so you might have to play with against a couple Sivers, at least for the first couple days of the patch. Keep that in mind. But that looks to be all for this video. So thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell notification, the actual subscribe button. But I don't know which video will be next, because life can have a lot of kinks. So until next time, take care. ggGetJinxed. Thank you for watching, and enjoy pizza responsibly.